So in this series, the Warriors have to guard the two main guys on Houston, which are Şengün and Jalen Green. In the half court, they have to firstly worry about the post-ups from Şengün. It's a main part of Houston's offense as they're fourth in post-up frequency and third in points per possession. And you can imagine that a good chunk of them are going to Şengün as he's one of the best bruiser bigs in the NBA. It's likely that Draymond will get that matchup, and generally speaking, it wouldn't be a bad idea to keep Draymond on Şengün since Draymond hasn't really done a bad job, but I don't think he's done a particularly great job either. But still, I would live with Draymond starting out on a single coverage, guarding him to see how it goes. However, it's very possible that Dre can just be way too small for a guy like Şengün. At that point, you're going to have to adjust. The first thing that I would like to see, regardless of what is happening, is sending Şengün away from the middle. If you look at his shot chart, there's a heavy dose of shot attempts in the paint, which makes sense because that's him likely backing down and turning over for a hook shot. But if you force him towards the baseline, now you can not only funnel him towards an area where he's not comfortable scoring in, he's likely going to take tough shots like faders, or he's going to drive into your help side. And this leads to the second thing, which is strong side zoning. If you force him baseline and you have somebody camping underneath the basket, now he's trapped in a box. Another thing that could be useful, which is a variation of this, is actually putting QP on Şengün. It sounds dumb, right? Because in hindsight, why would we ever want to put a rookie on an all-star? And you guys obviously know how I feel about QP playing in the playoffs. But however, if you actually look at the tape, Post is actually solid when it comes to walling up big dudes in the post. Against Memphis, he was very good when it came to standing his ground against a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. And Draymond is at his best when he's a roamer rather than strictly a post defender, or when guarding ball screens. And you gotta remember, Şengün is a big dude. He's close to 250 pounds. If we don't match his size at some point in the series, we're likely going to have to eventually do what we did against the Clippers, which is a complete fire, doubling from either the baseline or the entry pass. Both options are viable, but I think it's better to fire from the entry pass, just so it's better for our backside rotations to be able to slide in. And we can afford to help due to Houston's lack of shooting, in which we'll talk about more later on. Houston runs a heavy dosage of pick and roll as well, as they're 9th in frequency, but they're only 18th in points per possession. You can imagine this is mainly for a guy like Jalen Green, or Fred VanVleet, or even a little bit of Amen Thompson as well. I think the Warriors can execute standard coverage like a drop coverage, or better more their base coverage, which is the ice coverage. Jalen Green's shot profile consists of a lot of above the break threes and long twos, typical for a pick and roll player. The same goes for Fred VanVleet. However, Jalen Green is solid when it comes to above the break threes, not great, but also not bad, but he is abysmal at mid-range scoring. He ranks 76th in mid-range frequency, but only ranks 28th in efficiency. So he takes a lot of them, he just doesn't make them at a high rate. So the idea of playing a drop or an ice coverage is to bait him into taking long twos. That's the shot that we want him to take. If he starts converting on those shots, it's very possible for us to come up to the level of the screen because again, we can't afford to help against a team like this. If we need to send backside help to tag the roller, we can do that, but I think something else that the Warriors might do is mix in a couple of blitzes, considering the fact that we've done it a couple times against Jalen Green in the regular season, and he hasn't really responded well to them. Another thing is that Moses Moody is likely going to get the assignment of guarding Jalen Green, and he has to do a couple of things. The first thing is screen navigation. Relentlessly fight through every single screen. Do whatever you can to stay on Jalen Green and not let him get any clean separation. Secondly, disrupt his handle. Moody is one of the guys in the league who can generally disrupt any player's handle, and Jalen Green isn't exactly the best ball handler. He can fold under ball pressure, and Moody needs to put it on him. Thirdly, the foot speed is definitely a concern, but as long as they play ice, or if he can funnel Jalen and stay on his hip, then things should be okay. Eventually, they're going to do what every team tries to do against the Warriors, which is attack Steph. They're going to involve Steph on the ball. They're going to screen with his man and try to attack him. Houston is 11th in ISO frequency, but they're only 23rd in points per possession. So even though they're not exactly great at it, they will attack mismatches for a good amount of the game. Jalen Green was hunting for Steph many times in their last meeting, and Steph gave up a lot of dribble penetration. Now, I don't expect for Steph to be that bad in this series, but Jalen Green is a great athlete, so this is where the Warriors are likely going to have to execute their classic hedge and recover with Steph to prevent this mismatch. If Steph is guarding Dillon Brooks or Amen Thompson, you can live with those guys trying to score rolling or popping into space. Another thing that I think could be possible is that since Houston has a ton of non-shooters, instead of always trapping the box, why not just get in the gaps? Why not just pack the paint and force Houston to make shots instead of being in rotation? Which leads me to my next point, which is help side defense. Houston has the 24th worst effective field goal percentage of any team in the league. On top of that, they are horrible when it comes to scoring in the corner. They are 28th in frequency and 23rd in efficiency on corner threes. So this is a team that is not willing to take a whole lot of threes and make a lot of them. The Warriors need to make sure that they're helping off of the right guys. If there's a non-shooter in the corner and he happens to be in the strong side, help off of him even though it's normally ill-advised. If it happens to be Amen Thompson or Tari Eason, gap or help off every single time. If we happen to send help away from a shooter, this is where closeouts have to be sharp and calculated. Obviously, make sure you X out correctly, but don't close out to a non-shooter. Stunt at him and rotate to the next guy open. That's what they were doing to Tari Eason, and it was working tremendously. That's something that they have to be sharp with. Who to help off of, funneling players into them, and closing out to the right guys. Offensively, Şengün has to be involved in every single action. We cannot let him camp in the paint and allow Houston to switch their best and more athletic defenders on our perimeter players. Houston tried to place Şengün on a weak off-ball player that isn't a screener like Moody, and for the most part it did work since Moody doesn't play on the ball, nor is he a good screener. However, they did put Şengün on GP2 and it backfired quickly because GP2 is a screen and roller. So in this series, whoever Şengün is guarding, that person has to be a screener, and it's likely going to have to be Moody. When that happens, Şengün is going to be forced to hedge. That's what Ime Udoka is going to have Şengün do. In last game, Steph folded against the pressure and the physicality. He's going to have to be strong with the ball. If he holds onto it for too long or turns it over, then it's going to be a disaster. So what they could end up doing is putting Steph off the ball and having him receive an off-ball screen. This is where the Warriors have to be sharp with execution. Firstly, Moody has to set good screens. Amen Thompson is going to be draped all over Steph, practically face guarding him. If you set a weak ass screen, Steph is going to have zero separation and everything will go to shit. And this doesn't only apply to Moody, it applies to everyone else as well. Good screen setting is going to be key in this matchup. So if Moody provides good screen connection, then Şengün will have to come up to the level, and this is where you execute hedge/switch beaters like slipping, diving, popping, etc. This will require a third player to be a hub and make decisions, and the screener is also going to have to read what he should do. Having another bona fide scoring option in Jimmy Butler gives the Warriors another option to attack on offense. In this case, it's very important for Jimmy to attack Houston's backcourt. Houston is likely going to guard Jimmy with a guy like Dillon Brooks or Jabari Smith, and while Jimmy can score against those guys, it wouldn't be smart to go at them. They did try to put Fred VanVleet on Jimmy in the beginning of the game last time, but it backfired quick because Jimmy got to the rim very easily. So they had him switch onto Draymond, which was smart considering Dre is not a threat. He tried to post up Fred VanVleet once, and it just looked like Rudy Gobert playing offense. However, the main point is that Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green need to be switched onto Jimmy in his spots. And I think starting out with some off-ball screen-to-screener actions would be the initial move. This is where you'll see a shooter like Steph or Pods set a rip screen for Jimmy getting downhill. That's likely going to force a switch, and this is where Jimmy can inside seal. Dre throws it over the top, and Jimmy finishes the play. Or Jimmy can be the rip screener because he's so good at sealing his defender on his top side. But Houston is a very physical and smart team to where you're not just going to be able to do that every single time. So this is where you might see Jimmy receive inverted screens on the ball to force a switch. When this happens, I would like to see the Warriors set a lot of flat ball screens for Jimmy so he can get downhill, and it's also going to make it harder for the defense to hedge their smaller players out of there. You can imagine Dre and Jimmy might play some sort of two-man game if Fred VanVleet is on Dre. When they achieve that switch, if Jimmy's aggressively looking to score, that might pull in a guy like Şengün towards the rim, and that's where Moody can get easy looks. Another interesting thing with Houston is the two big lineup with Şengün and Steven Adams. They used it and dropped into a zone the last time we played them, and we didn't do a good job attacking it. The main thing in a zone, and everybody talks about it, is getting the ball to the middle and attracting multiple players' attention. You would want Jimmy in the middle because he's the only one who can catch it in the middle and operate. He can see the floor very well despite being in the middle, and he can absolutely score from that area. When that happens, that's going to open up shot opportunities, or better yet, baseline cuts behind the bigs because one of them could be so occupied towards Jimmy. But it's also important to note that sometimes you're just going to have to make shots. If you have two bigs in the game and they're camping in the backline, you have to score from the perimeter and make jump shots. Guys like Moody, Buddy, and Pods, them three have to be able to shoot the ball well. That goes for any kind of action that we run. When the ball is swung to them, they're going to have to shoot the ball well or else it's going to get spooky. Marginal effort is going to be key here because Houston is not known for their half-court offense and shot making. They're one of the best teams at imposing what their roster is constructed as, which is transition offense and offensive rebounding. Houston's half-court offense ranks 22nd 2nd among the league, but they're 8th in transition offense, but they're 1st in offensive rebound percentage and putbacks. So what this should tell you is that this is not a surgical team that picks other teams apart. They're a gritty young team that dukes it out in rock fights and wins possession battles to score. So it's wise to stay out of those areas. In terms of transition defense, it's not exactly what you do on defense here. Like, yeah, guys can sprint back quicker, but this team doesn't have a whole lot of athleticism as a whole to match the foot race from Houston. Instead, what you do in your half-court offense is actually what's important because it's interconnected to transition defense. Firstly, executing sharp half-court offense is key. This means handling the basketball, making quick decisions, good screening, player movement, and most importantly, not turning it over. If you take care of business offensively, even if you don't score, you can buy yourself a chance to possibly set up your defense. Another thing is staying out of limbo. This means having 1 or 2 guys crashing from the corner, and the players that aren't crashing will drop back. The Warriors are a top rebounding team, and they have great rebounding talent. They can surprise Houston in that aspect better than people think, but if guys are standing around and being caught in limbo, then it'll be a massive problem. Staying out of second chance opportunities is another one. I think the main thing that needs to happen here is that whenever somebody helps, there's gotta be somebody else helping the helper. Now obviously when you do that, you're trying to prevent an easy dump off underneath the basket. But what you're also doing is getting a body on the center underneath the rim and preventing him from putting it back in or getting an offensive rebound. Maybe even get 2 guys in there to make sure we secure a rebound since we are giving up size. But sometimes you just have to fight for every single loose ball. This is where playing Loon, Santos, and even JK is crucial. Loon has plenty of experience banging it out with some big boys in the playoffs and has even come out on top a few times. Santos is always looking to crash for a board or a loose ball. JK is a great athlete that can match Houston's athleticism. Just no reason why those guys shouldn't see minutes on the floor, especially knowing who we're up against in this series. This is important because this is where Houston does their damage. Things like this matter in the playoffs tremendously. It could be the difference between winning and losing. Both teams' offense could be so piss poor that winning margins like this can be the difference. So as much as breaking down this Houston half-court defense is important, banging it out in a rock fight and coming out as the last man standing is equally as important. It will certainly be a mix of intelligence and physicality.